I have a terrible temper. My brother is the only person in the world who can tolerate it. Everyone around us laughs at him, calling him an obsessively doting fool with a massive sister complex. But he always shrugs it off with absolute pride. She's my little sister. What's wrong with spoiling her a bit? But one day, my brother changed. He suddenly drew a sharp line between us, avoiding me at every turn. When I blocked his car in the middle of the street, he wouldn't even roll down the window to look at me. His voice came through the glass, flat and distant. David, it's time you learned to grow up. I thought my brother didn't want me anymore. Until I caught him drunk, locked inside his room, sobbing in the dark. System, how much longer until the real sun comes back? Can I really not be good to my David anymore? A mechanical voice replied, dripping with exasperated frustration. Get it through your head. They are the actual blood siblings. You're just an imposter. Can you please wake up? Listening from outside the door, the corners of my mouth slowly curled into a smile. So, my brother and I aren't related at all. I knew from a very young age that I wasn't normal. When I was 5 years old, some relatives were teasing me at a family dinner. They pointed to the dish of stewed meat on the table and claimed it was the pet rabbit I had been raising. They laughed, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. Well? You raised it yourself. Doesn't it taste delicious? I remained silent for a moment. Then, I picked up the boiling kettle from the side table and poured the scalding water directly over the hand of my uncle, the one laughing the loudest. The skin on his hand turned instantly white. Cooked. As the scent of scalded flesh rose alongside his pig-like shrieks of agony, I blinked innocently. That's your right hand, the one that grew up with you. Why don't you taste it and tell me if it's delicious? The dining room erupted into utter chaos. Amidst the frantic shouting of relatives branding me a monster, my father, blind with rage, grabbed a heavy wooden cane to strike me. But the blow never landed on me. My brother had thrown himself over my body, taking the hit. His face was pale, his eyelashes trembling with pain. Yet, he carefully pulled a small, snowy white ball from his coat. David, he whispered, his voice incredibly soft and soothing. Don't worry. Your rabbit is alive. I found him in the storage room. As long as I'm here, nothing will happen to you or your rabbit. I promise. My brother was 9 years old that year. He silently took a brutal beating from me. In the middle of the night, my mother wept as she applied ointment to his bruised back. Your father wasn't even trying to hit you. Why did you have to interfere? David is a psychopath. Who throws boiling water on an elder over a simple joke? My brother shook his head, his expression dead serious. It wasn't a joke. It would have broken her heart. I stood outside his door, listening in the shadows. The dark, violent urge that had flared up inside me because of my mother's harsh words was miraculously put to rest by the gentle sound of his voice. In the dozen years that followed, my temper grew more unpredictable and volatile. My parents looked at me with a mixture of fear and disgust. Only my brother, Ashton, behaved like a stubborn, single-minded machine, firmly believing that I was a fragile little sister who needed his constant protection. He tolerated every single one of my flaws. He even fought with our parents for my sake. If you had given David a normal, loving environment to grow up in, she wouldn't be like this. My sister has always been the sweetest girl. His friends couldn't stand it. We've seen overprotective brothers, but you're just living in denial, Ashton. Is there any chance your sister is actually the opposite of sweet? If you keep enabling her like this, something terrible is going to happen. Ashton only countered with absolute confidence. David is my sister. What's wrong with spoiling her? During my senior year of high school, Ashton, who had skipped 2 grades, graduated from university and began taking over the family business. He was drowning in work, yet he made it a point to drive to my school every single afternoon to pick me up. One day, the school bully tried to corner me to confess his love. I ended up beating him until he fell in line, and he ended up carrying my backpack to the car like a loyal servant. As the car door clicked shut, the interior fell into a dim silence. Ashton adjusted his cuffs, asking in a gentle tone, David, are you dating someone? I shook my head, chewing on a strawberry he had just fed me. Good. It's better not to focus on that right now. Your senior year is the most critical time. He spoke softly, almost to himself. I don't mean to interfere in your life, but this stage is very important. Besides, that boy who carried your bag earlier, he wasn't very pleasant to look at. You should keep your distance from him. Ashton's personality had always been incredibly mild. This was the first time I had ever heard him use such a sharp, critical word to describe someone else. I bit into the tip of the strawberry, quietly studying him. His hair had grown a bit long, falling in soft, messy strands across his forehead. His eyes were wide and luminous, like still water. Because of his corporate meetings, he was dressed in a tailored suit, but he still looked as harmless and soft as a white cloud. I had always known my brother was beautiful. His skin was as fair as delicate porcelain, and the tips of his ears and knuckles carried a faint, rosy tint. When he tilted his head, his soft hair brushed against his neck, revealing the faint blue veins beneath his skin. He looked a lot like the pet rabbit I used to have. The rabbit had died when I was 8. I hadn't shed a single tear while burying it, but Ashton had stood beside me, crying his eyes out. When I asked him why he was crying, he said, "David, I know you're hurting. You just don't know how to express it normally." A strange, familiar warmth bubbled up in my chest. Staring at the delicate pulse in his neck, I asked with a touch of anxiety, "Ashton, will you be my brother forever?" He answered without a moment's hesitation. "Of course." But he lied to me. Just before my 20th birthday, I realized Ashton was actively avoiding me. My parents had washed their hands of me long ago, so it was Ashton who had moved me into my university dorm. On his very first day in the city, he bought an apartment right next to the campus. This way, you don't have to worry about getting used to dorm life or dealing with difficult roommates. He thought of everything. In reality, I had already learned how to mask my behavior perfectly over the years, knowing exactly how to make people trust and like me. But I liked the feeling of being shielded by him, so I simply nodded and agreed. My mother was right about one thing. I was a monster. My entire existence was like 1,000 invisible threads wrapped tightly around Ashton. As long as he stayed still, I would remain docile and quiet. But the moment he tried to break free, those threads would cut into his flesh, binding us together forever. My brother belonged to me, and me alone. That was a truth that had been rooted in my mind since childhood. Apart from the days when my schedule was packed with classes, I spent almost every night at the apartment. Ashton would usually buy groceries and come home before sunset to cook for me. But on this particular afternoon, I unlocked the door to find a cold, empty dark living room. I checked my phone. It wasn't unusual for him to be delayed by urgent corporate meetings, but he always sent me a detailed text beforehand. Today, my notification bar was entirely blank. Our last chat was from 3 days ago, when I had sent a brief message, "I'm out of pads." He had never replied. I dialed his secretary's number. "Where is my brother?" The secretary stammered, offering vague excuses. I let out a soft laugh. "Should we discuss this in person instead?" The man was terrified of me. Hearing the tone of my voice, he hesitated for only a fraction of a second before cracking. "Mr. Hale isn't avoiding you on purpose. He has an important charity gala tonight, and a major contract to finalize. The fact that you are the one explaining this to me proves he is avoiding me on purpose," I said flatly. The secretary fell silent, not daring to speak. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and drove toward the venue. As I drove, the sun began to set, painting the horizon in a violent, fiery crimson. For some reason, my mind drifted back to a memory from several years ago. I was 14. My mother had taken advantage of Ashton's study abroad trip to lock me away in a strict behavioral modification school. By the time Ashton rushed back to rescue me, I had already set the main building on fire. "David." He had held me so tightly his entire body was shaking worse than mine. "Don't be scared. I'm here. I've got you." Actually, I hadn't been scared at all. But wrapped in his warm, trembling embrace, a single tear had escaped my eye. I had blinked it away, mimicking the pathetic, fragile tone of a normal girl. "Ashton, you have to protect me." "I will. I promise you, nothing like this will ever happen again." I had smiled, thoroughly satisfied. Through the dancing flames, I saw my mother cowering behind the police cars, staring at me as if I were a demon incarnate. "Ashton. She isn't your sister, she's a monster," she had screamed hysterically. "She started the fire. She's only 14 and she's already doing this. If we don't lock her up for rehabilitation, she'll destroy us all." Ashton hadn't even looked back at her. He lifted me into his arms, his voice colder than ice. "She doesn't need discipline. She needs love." I had pressed my face against his chest, inhaling his clean, comforting scent. It was different from anyone else's. He was supposed to go back to his studies abroad, but after that day, he changed his plans entirely. He stayed in the country for college, took over the family firm early, and refused to leave my side for more than 48 hours. He even accompanied me on my high school graduation trip. So why was he suddenly attending business dinners without telling me? I parked my car across from the grand entrance of the venue. After a few minutes, a familiar black luxury sedan pulled up to the valet. The window rolled down, revealing Ashton's strikingly handsome, pale face. He gave a polite nod to the security guard, handing over his invitation. Over the years, he had learned how to project a cold, commanding authority in public. But the soft, yielding, and gentle sides of him were reserved for me alone. Seeing him eased the tension in my chest. I smiled, preparing to step out of my car. But then, the rear passenger window rolled down. A beautiful woman leaned slightly forward, her lips curved into an elegant smile. Her fingers, resting casually against the car door, were long and slender. And on her middle finger sat a simple white gold band, identical to the one I wore. My mind went completely blank, a loud ringing filling my ears. My fingers instinctively moved to trace the middle finger of my own hand, where an identical white gold band rested. It was the gift I had made him pick out with me on my 18th birthday. I remembered his friend asking him in disbelief after we bought them, "Ashton, do you actually know what a ring on the middle finger represents? You guys are siblings." Ashton had simply given him a puzzled look. David wanted it. Why wouldn't I listen to her? His friend had been left entirely speechless. Now, looking across the street, I watched Ashton step out of the car. As he adjusted his cuffs, his bare fingers were fully visible. He had taken the ring off. The ring he had promised me he would never remove. I pushed my car door open and walked toward him. Ashton. He froze at the sound of my voice. He didn't turn around, keeping his back to me as he spoke in a muffled, strained voice. David? Why are you here? Go home. His broad shoulders under the tailored suit were incredibly rigid. Because he refused to face me, I had to crane my neck to catch the tight, strained line of his jaw. He was running from me. Before I could say anything else, the woman from the car walked over, her silk dress rustling. She brushed a stray curl past her shoulder, offering a warm smile. So this is David? Your sister? Yes, Ashton muttered. Since she's here, why don't we bring her inside to grab a bite? She offered her hand to me, the white gold ring on her finger catching the streetlights, sending a sharp stab of irritation through my chest. Before my hand could move, Ashton suddenly spun around and slapped her hand down. She can't go in, he said, his brow furrowing with a strange, nervous tension. He remained silent for several seconds before looking at me. David, go back to the apartment. I'll have Arthur order some takeout for you. I'm going to be very busy for the next few weeks, so I won't be able to come home. Take care of yourself. Without waiting for my response, he turned and walked briskly into the banquet hall. The woman lingered for a second, looking at me with an amused glint in her eyes. She pulled a pen from her clutch, scribbling a number on a card before handing it to me. Don't be sad. If you want to see your brother, call me anytime. Sad. I climbed back into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. In the rearview mirror, my lips were bitten raw, bleeding slightly. In the quiet, confined space, a flood of dark, chaotic emotions rushed through me. It wasn't sadness. It was a violent, suffocating possessiveness. Anger. And a dark, thrilling excitement. Had Ashton finally realized what a monster I was? Was he trying to run away from me because of it? Did that mean I finally had a reason to lock him away in my apartment, so he could never leave my side again? When I got back to the apartment, it was pitch black. Ashton hadn't been home in 3 days, and even his scent on the pillows had faded. I decided to head back to the university dorms. My roommates were surprised to see me. David. You don't have any classes for the next 2 days. Aren't you spending the weekend with your brother? I tilted my head, offering a rare, slight smile. I missed you guys. Is that a crime? 3 pairs of eyes stared at me in absolute shock. Just kidding. I tossed my bag onto my desk and opened my laptop. My roommate, Harper, walked over to offer me some fruit, but her eyes froze when she caught sight of my screen. David, what is that? I turned to look at her. What's wrong? Did someone make you mad? I rested my chin in my hand, thinking about it seriously. Not exactly. My brother is just being difficult. Harper's voice dropped to a nervous whisper. David, look, I don't mean anything by this, but we live in a civilized society. If someone's bothering you, you can talk to them. Or you can have your brother handle it, right? Some lines shouldn't be crossed. I stared into her eyes, completely serious. What if the person who made me angry is my brother? No way. Your brother is the king of overprotective siblings. We've only met him a few times and we could tell he worships the ground you walk on. She paused, swallowing hard as she looked back at the search results for industrial-grade locks on my screen. Wait. You're not planning on using those on him, are you? I didn't buy the industrial locks on Amazon. Online orders left paper trails. Delivery confirmations, tracking numbers, crumbs that Arthur, Ashton's hypervigilant secretary, could trace in his sleep. Instead, I drove 2 hours out of the city to an industrial hardware supplier in a dusty Rust Belt district. I bought 3 heavy-duty electronic deadbolts with manual bypass keys, soundproofing foam rolls, and reinforced steel door frames. The old cashier with yellowed fingernails didn't ask questions. People buying stuff like this in industrial zones were either paranoid preppers or building panic rooms. In a way, I was building both. When I returned to the apartment next to my university campus, I went to work. Over 3 days, while Ashton was absent, presumably playing the dutiful placeholder for a family that wasn't his, I retrofitted the master bedroom. I replaced the standard wooden door with a solid core steel slab, set into a reinforced frame anchored directly into the concrete subwall. I installed the soundproofing behind the drywall, layered under thick acoustic panels that looked like modern art installation pieces. Inside, I stocked the room with everything a person could ever need: a plush king-sized mattress, soft Egyptian cotton sheets in the pale silver shade he liked, a private bathroom stocked with his favorite lavender body wash, books, a high-end audio setup, and soft indirect lighting that mimicked natural sunlight. It wasn't a dungeon. It was a golden birdcage, crafted with meticulous love. On the 4th evening, I sat on the edge of the velvet sofa in the dark living room, twirling the white gold band on my middle finger. My phone rested on the Glass coffee table, displaying a single drafted text message. Ashton, I had another episode. There's blood on my hands. Please come back. I didn't need to elaborate. Ashton had a psychological tripwire buried deep in his mind, a trigger crafted over a decade of taking punches, cane blows, and social exile for me. He had conditioned himself to believe that whenever my violent tendencies flared, it was a failure of his protection. I pressed send. 9 minutes later, the locks on the front door clicked violently. The door burst open, slamming against the wall. Ashton stumbled into the entryway, his tie loosened, his forehead slick with cold sweat. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, fixed in a state of absolute, frantic panic. David, his voice cracked, raw and breathless. He scanned the dark room, his eyes catching my silhouette on the couch. David, where are you hurt? Who, what happened? He rushed toward me, dropping his briefcase onto the floor. But 3 feet away, he suddenly remembered the sharp line he had drawn between us. He stopped dead in his tracks. A visible tremor ran down his spine. His hands twitched at his sides, fighting the overwhelming impulse to reach out and pull me into his arms. David, he whispered, his voice instantly cooling into that fake, distant tone he had used through his car window. Where is the blood? Did you hurt someone at school? Call Arthur. He will clean it up. I told you, I can't be here anymore. There is no blood, Ashton, I said softly, standing up. He blinked, confused. What? I lied. A flash of anger, rare, flickering light in his usually mild eyes, passed over his features. You lied? David, do you have any idea what he caught himself taking a step backward toward the exit. This is childish. I'm leaving. He turned on his heel and grabbed the doorknob. He pulled. The door didn't budge. The heavy electronic deadbolt I had installed on the main entrance engaged with a sharp, heavy clack. Ashton froze. He rattled the handle, his posture stiffening. David. Unlock the door. I can't do that, brother, I said, walking slowly toward him. The word brother tasted heavy and sweet on my tongue, laced with a bitter, thrilling irony. You've been so busy lately. You took off your ring. You met with pretty women. You let your system tell you that you don't belong to me anymore. Ashton's entire body went rigid. He spun around, his face drained of all color. Paler than porcelain. What did you just say? He stammered, his lips trembling. System, I repeated, stepping into his personal space, tilting my head up to look into his wide, terrified eyes. How much longer until the real sun comes back? Can I really not be good to my David anymore? Ashton looked at me as if I were a ghost. You heard? I heard everything, I murmured, my hand reaching up to gently trace the sharp line of his jawline. His skin was cold. You cried, Ashton. You cried inside your room because you thought you had to abandon me. Because some voice in your head told you that I'm not your real sister, and that you're just an imposter. A mechanical, buzzy hum seemed to resonate faintly in the air around us, though I knew it was inside his head. Ashton gasped, his hand flying to his chest, his eyes rolling back slightly as if struck by a wave of intense physical pain. Warning, host is attempting to reveal narrative core to non-essential NPC. Punishment protocol initiated. A sharp, electric shock seemed to pass through his frame. Ashton collapsed to his knees with a muffled groan, clutching his ribs, gasping for air. Stop. Ashton choked out, staring at the floor, his knuckles white against the hardwood. Don't hurt her. It's hurting you, isn't it? I knelt beside him, my fingers threading through his soft, dark hair, cradling his head against my shoulder. The familiar, clean scent of his soap washed over me. The voice in your head. It's punishing you for talking to me. David, run, Ashton gasped through gritted teeth, sweat dripping from his chin onto my collarbone. Get away from me. It's not safe. The real story, the real brother, he's coming back next week. If I don't give him his place, the system will erase me. I held him tighter, feeling the erratic, violent pounding of his heart against my chest. Erase you? I whispered, a dark, manic smile curling my lips in the dim hallway. Light. Nobody gets to erase what belongs to me. Not your system. Not our parents. And certainly not some fake brother. I dragged Ashton into the master bedroom. He was too weak from the electroshock punishment to resist, his body trembling violently every time he tried to pull away from me. I laid him on the bed, clicked the heavy steel door shut, and engaged the triple locks from the inside. The silence inside the soundproofed room was absolute. No traffic noise from the street below, no hum of the city. Just the sound of his ragged breathing and the ticking of a small clock on the bedside table. "You're crazy," Ashton whispered, staring up at the ceiling as I sat beside his hip, carefully removing his shoes. "David, you don't understand what you're dealing with. This isn't a human being you can beat up or set on fire. It's a system. It controls the narrative of this world." "I don't care about the world," I said, leaning down to press my cheek against his arm. "I only care about my world. And you're in it. I am an imposter." Ashton shouted suddenly, his voice cracking with a sudden, desperate rage. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes, tracing hot paths down his pale temples. "I was brought into this world 10 years ago. My mission was to act as a placeholder brother until the male lead, Julian, the real blood son of the Hale family, was found and returned. I was supposed to build the company, protect you until he arrived, and then step down and die of an heart condition to clear the way." He grabbed my shoulders, his hands shaking violently. "My task is almost over, David. In 7 days, Julian returns. If I don't pull away from you, if I don't let Julian take over the role of your brother and the heir of the Hale Empire, the system will destroy my soul. Do you want me to die?" I stared at him, my expression unreadable. So that was it. The mother who hated me. The father who feared me. The sudden urge to discipline me, the sudden decision to send me away, it was all scripted. And Ashton, my gentle, beautiful, foolish brother, had been forced to act as my meat shield. Taking the blows meant for an plotline, knowing all along that he was scheduled to be discarded like garbage. "The woman with the ring," I said softly, ignoring his question. "Who was she?" Ashton blinked, taken aback by my sudden pivot. "Her name is Vivian. She's the system's human proxy in this world. A monitor sent to ensure I fulfill my death flag properly. She made me take off the ring. She said if I showed any lingering affection for you, she would accelerate Julian's return and have you committed to an asylum." A cold, razor-thin feeling settled deep in my stomach. Not anger, anger was hot. Wild, chaotic. This was something far colder. It was calculation. "So," I said, running my index finger along the edge of his jaw, tracing the soft line down to his throat. "If you stay near me, the system hurts you. If you love me, the system tries to kill you." "Yes," Ashton breathed, his eyes wide with fear. "So let me go, David. Please. Let me finish the task. Let me die quietly so you can live a normal life with your real brother." Slap. The sound echoed sharply in the silent room. Ashton's head snapped to the side. A faint red mark bloomed on his fair cheek. He stared at me in complete shock, his breath catching in his throat. "Don't you ever say something that's stupid again," I said, my voice dangerously low, dripping with lethal malice. "A normal life? With a stranger named Julian? Do you think I give a damn about bloodlines?" I grabbed his tie, pulling his face inches from mine. "When I was 5 years old and poured boiling water on our uncle, who covered my body with his own? Who took a wooden cane to the spine until he couldn't walk? For a week? Who brought me a live rabbit from the dark storage room?" Ashton's eyelashes trembled, brimming with fresh tears. "David. It wasn't Julian," I hissed. "It was you. You are the only person who ever looked at a monster like me and saw something worth loving. You built me. Ashton. You taught me how to smile, how to pretend to be human, how to survive in this sickening family. You think I'm going to let some invisible parasite inside your head take you away from me? You can't fight it," he sobbed, his composure finally shattering completely. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face into the crook of my neck, his hot tears soaking into my sweater. "You can't fight the system, David, it's too strong. It hurts so much every time I try to defy it. I just wanted you to be safe." I wrapped my arms around his waist, holding him as tightly as I could, feeling the shuddering sobs racking his body. "System," I thought, staring at the white wall over Ashton's trembling shoulder. My eyes narrowing into slits of pure, unadulterated venom. "You picked the wrong world to play your little game." For the next 3 days, Ashton remained locked inside the master bedroom. I didn't tie him down. I didn't need to. I took his phone, his laptop, and locked the steel door from the outside whenever I left. Inside, he had food, water, books, and soft sheets. I spent every night sleeping in the same bed, wrapped around him like a vine, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Every few hours, the system would attempt to trigger a penalty on him for deviating from the plot. Ashton would writhe in pain, sweating, his heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. And every single time, I would hold him, pressing my skin against his, talking to him in a soft, low voice, distracting his mind, grounding him in reality. Until the pain passed. I learned the rules of the system through observation. It wasn't omnipotent. It was an algorithm, a rigid set of logical conditions and narrative scripts. It relied on Ashton's compliance to execute its mandates. It punished him through psychosomatic shocks, leveraging his fear of death and his desire to protect me. If Ashton refused to surrender mentally, the system's influence was limited to pain. It couldn't directly kill him without breaking its own internal logic, because Ashton's character arc required him to die of a specific plot-mandated heart failure after Julian was fully integrated. If Julian was never integrated, Ashton's death flag couldn't be triggered without corrupting the storyline completely. On the fourth morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it calmly while stirring a pot of chicken porridge in the kitchen. "Is this David Hale?" A man's voice echoed through the speaker. It was smooth, arrogant, carrying a subtle, underlying tone of condescension. "Who's calling?" "I think you know who I am," the man chuckled softly. "Or at least, you ought to. I'm Julian. Julian Hale." I set the wooden spoon down. "Ah. The long-lost son. Glad to see you're informed," Julian said, his tone dripping with self-satisfied smugness. "I'm currently at the Hale Manor. Father and mother are, well, they're weeping tears of joy, as you can imagine. They've spent 20 years living with an imposter and a psychopathic daughter. You can't blame them for being relieved that the real heir has finally returned. Is that so?" I leaned against the counter, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of emotion. "I called to give you a fair warning, little sister," Julian continued, his voice dropping into a menacing whisper. "I know Ashton has been hiding you away. I know what kind of freak you are. The fire at 14, the boiling water at 5. I've read your file. But things are different now. I'm back. Ashton is being stripped of his position as CEO of Hale Enterprises by the board of directors this afternoon. By tonight, he will be a nobody." "And where is Vivian?" I asked abruptly. There was a brief pause on the other end. Julian sounded slightly caught off guard. "Vivian? She's my fiancée. She's standing right next to me. Tell Vivian," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, "that if she touches a single strand of Ashton's hair, I will tear her open from throat to navel." Silence hung over the line for 3 long seconds. Then, Julian burst into a loud, obnoxious laugh. "You really are insane. Do you think you're in control here? You're a teenager with a personality disorder. Ashton is a broken tool whose time is up. By 6 o'clock tonight, the board will officially sign over all of Ashton's assets to me. And as for Ashton, well, heart conditions run in his fake family, don't they? He won't survive the week." 6 o'clock at the corporate headquarters?" I asked. "Yes. Feel free to come watch," Julian sneered. "Watch the moment your beloved brother loses everything." He hung up. I stood in the sunlit kitchen for a moment, looking at the silent phone in my hand. Then, I turned and walked into the master bedroom. Ashton was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head down. He had heard every word through the open door. "David," he whispered, looking up at me with pale, sunken eyes. "It's happening. The board meeting. Julian is taking the company. The system's narrative is finalizing. Once he takes the position, my character's existence becomes redundant." I walked over to the closet, pulled out his finest dark charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a deep crimson silk tie. I threw them onto the bed in front of him. "Get dressed," I said. Ashton stared at the suit, confused. "What?" "We are going to a board meeting." At 5:30 p.m., the black luxury sedan pulled into the underground parking garage of the Hale Enterprise headquarters, a 70-story glass and steel monolith in the heart of the financial district. Ashton sat in the passenger seat, his hands trembling violently. He was wearing the dark suit, but his face was deathly pale. Every few minutes, he would clutch his chest, gasping as the system inside his brain delivered sharp warnings of narrative violation. "Warning, host is attempting to interfere with the protagonist's ascension. Severe punishment will be administered in 10 minutes. It hurts, David." He wheezed, cold sweat soaking his collar. "It feels like my heart is being squeezed by iron tongs." I reached across the console, grabbing his icy hand and squeezing it tightly, until my nails bit into his skin. "Look at me, Ashton," I commanded. He forced his eyes open, looking into mine. "Pain is just electricity," I said, my voice dead serious. "It's signal noise. You took a heavy wooden cane to the spine for me when you were 9 years old. And you didn't shed a single tear until you made sure my rabbit was safe. You are stronger than some invisible parasite program. Hold on for 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes. Ashton stared at me, his wide, luminous eyes reflecting the dim fluorescent lights of the parking garage. Slowly, painfully, he swallowed hard, nodded, and tightened his grip on my hand. Okay, he whispered. 30 minutes. We took the private executive elevator directly to the 68th floor. When the silver doors slid open, the grand hallway leading to the main boardroom was lined with security guards and corporate executives. At the end of the hall, standing outside the double mahogany doors, were our parents, Mr. and Mrs. Hale, alongside Julian and Vivian. My mother was dressed in an elegant navy blue designer dress, her face radiant with a joy I had never seen in my 20 years of life. Beside her stood Julian, tall, wearing an expensive tailored suit, looking every bit the proud, triumphant air. Beside Julian stood Vivian. She was dressed in a sleek red dress, her arms crossed over her chest. Unlike our parents, who were smiling, Vivian's eyes narrowed into sharp, cold needles the second she saw Ashton and me stepping out of the elevator. Ashton? My mother's smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure disgust. What are you doing here? How dare you show your face after abandoning the family business for 3 days? Mother, Ashton began, his voice raspy. Don't call me mother, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the marble corridor. You imposter. We raised you, gave you everything, and you're not even our blood. Julian is our real son. The doctors confirmed the DNA test yesterday. You've been occupying a position that never belonged to you. My father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, holding his silver-headed walking stick. Ashton, hand over your corporate seal and leave. Quietly. If you have any shame left, you will sign over your equity shares to Julian and disappear. Ashton stood there, taking the verbal blows in silence, his shoulders tense. Julian smirked, stepping forward, thrusting his hands into his pockets. Listen. To father and mother, Ashton. You've played the role of the big brother long enough. It's time to step down before things get ugly. Vivian walked up beside Julian, leaning in close to Ashton, her voice dropping into a whisper that only Ashton, I, and the ambient silence could hear. You're defying the system, Ashton, Vivian warned, her eyes glittering with cold malice. You were supposed to suffer a fatal heart attack in your apartment tonight. Why are you here? Do you want me to trigger the maximum punishment level right now? Ashton gasped, grabbing his chest as a sudden wave of agony washed over him, forcing him down to one knee. Ashton. I caught him before he hit the marble floor, cradling his back. Julian chuckled, shaking his head. Look at him. Pathetic. A heart condition. Already taking hold. Security, throw these two out. Wait, I said. The coldness in my voice was so absolute, so devoid of human warmth, that the entire hallway seemed to drop 5 degrees. I slowly stood up, leaving Ashton resting against the wall, and stepped toward Julian and Vivian. My mother flinched, instinctively taking a step back behind my father. David. Don't you dare start your madness here. The security guards are armed. I ignored her. My eyes were fixed entirely on Vivian. You're the monitor, I said, stopping 2 feet away from her. Vivian smirked, arrogance radiating off her. And what if I am? You're just an NPC, David. A side character designed to be a psychotic obstacle for the main plot. You have no power here. I control the code of this world. Code? I tilted my head, looking at her as if she were a curious insect. You control code. But do you know what I control? Before anyone in the hallway could react, before the security guards could move, before Julian could blink, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a 4-inch industrial steel screwdriver I had brought from my toolbox. In one fluid, blindingly fast motion, I grabbed Vivian by her sleek red collar, dragged her forward, and slammed her against the heavy mahogany boardroom door. Thud. Aff. Vivian screamed as the back of her head slammed into the wood. David, my father roared in horror. Security. 2 security guards lunged forward, drawing their batons. Without looking back, I jammed the sharp tip of the heavy screwdriver directly into the soft flesh under Julian's jawline, stopping a millimeter short of his carotid artery. Julian froze instantly, his face turning ghostly white, his eyes bulging in absolute terror. Blood trickled down the metal shaft from the tiny puncture wound. Move 1 step, I whispered, my voice calm, sweet, and horrifyingly steady. And I'll drive this through his brain stem. Let's see if your protagonist can survive without a central nervous system. The security guards froze in their tracks, paralyzed with panic. My mother screamed, falling to her knees in terror. My father's walking stick clattered onto the floor. You're crazy. Julian whimpered, his hands hovering in the air, afraid to breathe. You're a monster. I told you I was. I smiled gently, my eyes turning back to Vivian, who was squirming in my grasp, her face pale with shock. Now, monitor, I purred into Vivian's ear, pressing her face hard against the door. Let's test your system. You can't kill us. Vivian gasped, her voice trembling despite her attempts to sound dominant. The system won't allow a side character to break the main plot narrative. The system operates on logic and probability, I whispered, pressing the steel screwdriver slightly deeper into Julian's jaw. Julian let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. If the main protagonist dies here, the story collapses. If the monitor dies, there's no one to report to the control center. The system is a machine, Vivian. It doesn't have a soul. It only cares about completion. I turned my head slightly, looking back at Ashton, who was watching me from the floor, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror, awe, and desperate love. Ashton built this company from the ground up, I declared, my voice echoing down the silent corridor for all the corporate board members peeking out of the doors to hear. He worked 18 hours a day, skipped sleep, signed every contract, and expanded the family assets tenfold while this real son was playing rich kid in Europe. David. Ashton rasped, slowly pulling himself up using the wall for support. If Ashton dies, I continued, staring down Vivian, I will burn this 70-story building to the ground with everyone inside it. I will hunt down every single board member, every executive, and every member of this useless family, and I will cut their throats in their sleep. I will turn this main story into a slaughterhouse. Vivian's eyes widened in sheer horror. She looked at my face, searching for a hint of bluffing, a trace of hesitation. She found none. She was looking into the eyes of a true, unhinged psychopath, a person who cared nothing for societal rules, law, ethics, or her own survival. A person whose entire universe was bound to a single human being. Alert, critical narrative anomaly detected. NPC David Hale is displaying Level 5 unstable behavior. Protagonist death risk, 99.8%. Calculating alternative pathways. In the air around us, a strange, high-frequency static hum began to vibrate, so loud that even the security guards rubbed their ears in confusion. Vivian's eyes rolled back as she received the flood of emergency system warnings directly inside her mind. Narrative constraints failing. Rewriting character destinies to prevent premature termination of world matrix. No. Vivian gasped, trembling. No. System, execute punishment protocol on Ashton. Kill him now. Try it, I snapped, turning the screwdriver hard enough to draw a fresh streak of crimson from Julian's neck. The moment his heart stops, Julian's heart stops. 2. Stop. Stop. Julian shrieked, weeping openly, his tears mixing with the blood on his neck. Vivian, stop it. Undo whatever you're doing. I don't want to die. Give him the company. Give him whatever he wants. Julian, shut up. Vivian screamed, but her authority was completely shattered. From the floor, Ashton felt the suffocating, crushing pressure on his chest suddenly ease. The electric, burning pain that had racked his nerve endings for weeks began to recede, like a retreating tide. He took a long, deep, clear breath of air, the first real breath he had taken in 10 years. System reconfiguration complete. Character Ashton Hale, role reassigned. Independent antagonist / patriarch. Death flag removed. Host released from task binding. The mechanical voice that had tormented Ashton for a decade dissolved into static, fading away into absolute silence. Ashton blinked, staring at his hands. The heavy, invisible chains that had dragged him toward a scripted death were gone. The cold, mechanical presence in his mind was entirely empty. He was free. It's gone, Ashton whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief. He looked up at me, a single tear slipping down his pale cheek. David, it's gone. I let out a soft laugh. I pulled the screwdriver back from Julian's throat and shoved him hard into Vivian. The two of them collapsed into a disgraceful heap on the marble floor, gasping and weeping like pathetic fools. My father and mother stared at us, frozen in terror, looking at their real son cowering on the floor, and then at Ashton, who was standing tall, his posture straight, his eyes clear and alive. I walked over to Ashton, taking his warm hand in mine. Let's go home, brother, I said softly. Ashton looked down at our joined hands, then looked back at our parents, Julian, and the trembling board members. The gentle, weak, submissive look in his eyes was entirely replaced by something cold, strong, and unwavering. Hale Enterprises belongs to me, Ashton said, his voice echoing through the corridor with absolute authority. If any of you have an objection, you can discuss it with my sister. Nobody dared to utter a word. 3 months later. The high-rise luxury apartment overlooking the city was quiet. The afternoon sun cast long, golden rays across the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room. On the news broadcast playing silently on the wall-mounted television, a reporter was announcing the complete restructuring of Hale Enterprises under the sole leadership of Ashton Hale. The former patriarch and matriarch had retired to an overseas estate, completely stripped of corporate power, while Julian had vanished from public life altogether, terrified to set foot in the city. In the kitchen, Ashton was standing by the stove, wearing a dark gray sweater and an apron, carefully stirring a pot of strawberry jam. The pale rosy tint was back on his ears and knuckles. His face was full, healthy, and incredibly handsome, free from the lingering shadow of death that had haunted him for years. On the middle finger of his right hand, a simple white gold band caught the sunlight, gleaming brightly. I walked into the kitchen quietly, slipping my arms around his waist from behind, pressing my forehead against his back. I could feel the strong, steady, effortless beating of his heart. Ashton stopped stirring, a soft, indulgent smile spreading across his lips. David, he murmured, laying his hand over mine resting on his stomach. The jam is almost ready. Go sit down. No, I whispered, tightening my grip on him. I like it here. He turned around inside my arms, tilting his head down to look at me. His luminous, clear eyes were filled with an overwhelming, endless tenderness, a devotion that had survived systems, plotlines, bloodlines, and fate itself. You know, Ashton said softly, raising his hand to stroke my hair, his fingers lingering on my cheek. Arthur asked me today why I haven't moved into the Hale family mansion yet. What did you tell him? I told him I prefer this apartment, Ashton smiled, his thumb gently tracing my lip. I told him I like the soundproofed master bedroom. It's very quiet. Very safe. I chuckled, leaning up to press my lips against the delicate pulse point on his neck. He didn't shrink away. He leaned into the touch, his arms wrapping around me, locking us together in an embrace that no force in this world could ever break. We were monsters. We were imposters. We were a psychotic girl and her single-minded, obsessed keeper. And we were going to live happily ever after.